Hola, mi familia. Welcome, all, but especially you, to Soul Mechanics. Please step into my office. Be seated. This video I need to do, I have to get done for Innocent Bako, however you pronounce it, because I promised, and that's something I want to point out, because I said I would. Like, there's other videos that I want to do, that I need to do, and that I'm excited about doing right now, but I'm doing this video because I said I would, and I need to get it out of the way. This Lee, the symbol of Soul Mechanics, my sword Lee, named after my ex-wife, it has on the hilt a wristband put on there that says, "Because I said I would." That was given to me by a student I had a few years back that I loved very dearly, to whom I told her that I was going to start a revolution for her. And here we are, getting that going. That wristband she gave me, because I said I would, that became the symbol, part of the symbol for Soul Mechanics and the initiative in general, the sword that cuts through the darkness, the sword of light. So that's something that's important to me, keeping your word, being, you know, honorable, and loyalty. That's very important to me. I just posted something for you guys saying, you know, that I value everybody who's loyal and honest and true, and I really do. I love you guys dearly. I'm very happy that you're here, and we are going to be having some fun going into the summer here. We're going to really get some shit done. Got a lot plotted out, and we're going to make some seriously big moves, but for now, we need to cover the basics, and so this is going to be the first of 3 videos covering, well, maybe 4 videos, covering the color types. And generally, the idea behind this, before I go ahead, if anybody notices, if anybody can spot any one of the 3 things that I am currently slipping by YouTube censorship policies, say something in the comments. Don't say what it is, because that would fuck us. Don't say what it is. Just, if you spot it, let me know in the comments. I see it. Anyways, the general idea, I guess, something that's implied by the color coding system in and of itself, is that the person, the personality, the soul of you is in fact a mechanical entity. That it can be dissected, and you know, that the very value of it can be dissected, can be broken into pieces and examined in such a way as to understand the general functioning of it from a somewhat objective perspective. And that's, you know, essentially makes an object out of you, and that's what we're trying to get at. That's what we need to do. I understand if you don't want to be an object. I understand if you don't want to consider yourself to be machinery, but too bad. That is in fact what we are. We are machinery. There is a life, a current of consciousness that's running through us, that's running through the value system that we in fact create, and ultimately you are that consciousness. Obviously, you're the observer, you're the conscious entity, you're the life that's coming through this system, but there's a very crafty illusion in play with that value system that causes for you to observe yourself as being this isolated personality, where in fact you are not. And most of us can conceptualize that. What we need to get at through Soul Mechanics here, what I'm trying to share with you guys, is the actual realization of that. But in order to realize that you are in fact a conscious living entity, that you are the initial life source coming through from that you are God itself, that you are the universe, in order to make you actually live that truth and that feel it, really get to it, we do have to acknowledge and accept the fact that what you think you are is not real. It's a machine. You are your personality. The person you think you are is a robot. I mean, the body you have, it's like a robot, and the personality that you have is an illusion. And you, throughout the course of your development, you're going to get to that, blues most especially, and as I said, this video is for blues initially. Blues will tend to get to that faster, depending. There's a chance that they might they might get stuck in that certain phase I've mentioned before in the, what was it called, I think it was the invitation video, the crossing the line invitation video for the Remnants program, where I mentioned that blues have this phase that they tend to get stuck in, and it's because of this phase. A lot of the blues that we run into are going to be in this phase. It's kind of like the magnetics of it, the laws of attraction and the magnetic compatibility in play will attract them together when they're in this phase. The reason being that they're trying to isolate themselves, and the opposites are going to attract. And it's very odd how that there is the factor of magnetics where opposites attract in play, but then there's the like attracts like at the same time. And these actually fit together. They're not mutually exclusive. We'll get to explaining how that works, but for now, you have to see the contradiction in it. There's a paradox in play there in the very nature of how existence operates. There's a fundamental paradox, and that's because eternity itself is built out of paradox. We've spoken of this before. We'll get to it when speaking to the boundary, but for now we're going to talk about the people who actually make it to the boundary more often than not, the people who make it to the boundary first. Blues. Now, blues, they're going to be identifiable in the fact that they're always asking why. When we get to the questions, the introduction questions for the initiative group, we ask what's the most interesting question to ask, and the blues are going to be asking why. In general, usually blues are going to answer just why. That's going to be their answer. Now, greens will have other answers, reds will have other answers. The fourth color type, purplers, they'll have very meticulous answers, odd answers, but blues, for the most part, are usually going to just answer why. That's the question. Just why in general, why applied to anything they come across, because that's what they do. They're always questioning why. They're into the reasoning of things. They want to understand what makes things happen, what makes things tick. They want to understand the reasons behind the operations of things, while greens are going to want to understand the operations themselves, but we'll get to greens later. Something about blues is that obviously they're going to be intelligent people, they're intellectual. You can spot them because they're going to be the intellectual types. They're going to be very interested in intellectual concepts, philosophies, shit like that. They might be interested in religions. They're going to be interested in organizations, ultimately. Anything that comes into a conglomerate factor, anything that has pieces, parts at play, they're going to be interested in the reasoning behind the functioning of things. And, you know, this is where we speak to, like, groups and communities and shit with functioning pieces, is what I mean there. Not necessarily, like, gadgets and machineries, but sociology. They're going to have a big interest in sociology, psychology. Fuck, motherfucker. I don't need 4 or 5 fucking commercials between every damn YouTube video, dude. YouTube people, if you're watching, we don't need 7 advertisements every time we go to a new video. Like, we make playlists for a reason, man. Anyways, something about blues that comes to light that Sweetie Cheeks actually illuminated is that blues tend to be kind of sloppy. They have poor organization skills where it comes to, like, their personal living space. And apparently this is something that's attributed to intellectuals in general, but especially genius types. Very intelligent people are going to be disorganized where it comes to their things. And I mean, if I weren't too embarrassed to show you my bedroom right now, you'd understand what I mean by that. Like, it's a fucking mess, and I can't, like, no matter how well I clean it, it gets that way again in no time. Like, I just, and I gather things and such. So I can speak to myself where it comes to blues. I can set myself as an example. But it seems that this is all over the place. I'm sorry, my notes are everywhere. I'm just gonna point out whatever I see here. So there's no, like, structure to this, but it seems that the time dilation factor, wherein you can stretch out time, that might be somewhat exclusive to blues, or at least they're going to have the best knack for it, and it's going to be a lot more difficult for other people to achieve. Reasons for that being that blues are going to be crossing, not crossing, but reaching the boundary That's going to be their primary focus. Ultimately, when they get down to it, blues are going to be the psychonauts, the people who are into psychedelics for the most part. I mean, everybody can be into psychedelics. Everybody shares these traits, but for the blues, it's going to be unique unto them in the sense that they're going to be fixated on it, at least earlier in their development. They're going to be into psychedelics. They're going to be into exploring the psyche, psychology, all, like I said, you know, intellectual factors, philosophical factors. And in reaching the boundary, you get to the point where you can see a fourth dimension, and that fourth dimension when you see the fourth dimension happening, you come to understand comprehension itself as being one with matter and one with time. And so you can actually see time itself, actual time, not like the passing time, like tick, tick, tick. I'm talking about the fabric of reality again. And when you can see comprehension as being an object, a dimension, and you can look at it and actually view it, the thing is that there's something called the Turing paradox in play with quantum mechanics that we've discovered, wherein observation actually arrests the development of a thing. Like when you look, observing a molecule or observing an atom actually stops it from evolving in the sense of, delineating or dissecting itself, becoming more complex, evolving time-wise, evolution of its time. Observing a thing actually arrests its development and slows it down, if not stops it. And so I'm theorizing that the observation of comprehension itself is arresting the time and slowing it down and causing for the actual passing of time to stretch out in our perception. That's what I think is happening. And again, there are methods to train this, to practice this, that we'll get to. I'll do that for a different course, but that's my theory on one. That's one theory. There's another theory involving a neurotransmitter called glutamate that people experience time dilation in times of stress when they're endangered. Like when they get that huge adrenaline boost, that glutamate floods the brain and it causes for time to stretch out in their perception. That's another one. I think they're interrelated, and I think they both have to do with the activation of the Kundalini impulse, but that's getting off topic. Blues will have a knack for mirroring people, and this is a trick that blues can use to communicate with people. Blues are going to be very good with communication. That's going to be their innate faculty. That's their talent, their ability. They're going to be great with communication. They're going to be great with rhetoric. They're going to be great with understanding psychology, understanding the whys of things, being able to step into other people's shoes, break through that boundary and step into other people's shoes and understand them to such an extent that they can actually manipulate them, to manipulate their value systems. And again, that's where spot casting comes into play. But mirroring is a trick that blues can use. If you don't know what mirroring is, essentially it's when you see somebody's habits or somebody's mannerisms and their speech patterns, and just generally a person's mannerisms and habits, their routines, you mimic them in order to build a rapport. And that's a neat trick that blues can use. Anybody can use that, obviously, but blues are going to have a tendency to do it. But at the same time, blues are also going to be very unique in and of themselves, and there's a point in the primary stage in their development, as I said, where we can notice them, where they tend to come together because they're being isolated. They drag together. Magnetic compatibility brings them together. Blues will reach this phase in their development where they're reaching the boundary and they're reaching out into the depths of the psyche, or down rather into the depths of the psyche, and they're isolating themselves. They'll begin to isolate themselves, and they'll have this idea that, again, they're going to, like I've stated before, they're going to get this idea that they're all-knowing, they understand everything, and then they've got it all covered, and then they're going to have that sense that only I know. Any other blue they come across is going to be competition in their own right, and they're going to essentially, blues will even go so far as to disagree with other blues about what they believe. Like a blue will think something, and then another blue will say the same thing, only a little bit better, and they'll disagree with it just for the sake of breaking that rapport. They'll have this competition factor where it comes to the psyche, and it'll get the better of them, so watch out for that. It'll get the fucking best of them. Be careful with that. We're trying to be in agreement, we're trying to work together, we're trying to coordinate, so don't. Blues out there who are in that phase, anybody watching, especially innocent Baku, if you reach that phase where you're reaching into the depths of yourself and discovering yourself, and you feel like you want to isolate, you're going to get to that stage where you feel like you want to isolate, you want to push others away, keep yourself down. You're going to have a tendency to tell people, I'm just walking my own path. No, everybody's walking the same path. We just got to get on page with that. Don't do that. We can't afford to do that. That's a habit blues have that we cannot afford to accommodate at this time. We have no time for that shit. We need everybody to be out and about in the world, working together, expressing and presenting themselves openly. We can't afford to be hiding away, isolating ourselves, pretending that we're better than everybody. You're not better than everybody. Don't let that false ego idea get the best of you. Acknowledge similarities. Be accepting. Acceptance is going to be the biggest issue that we have to deal with. Acceptance, acknowledgement, and resentment, essentially. The ability to move on. That's what the entire world needs to be dealing with right now. But blues are going to get that. Because you're going to get to a point in your development where you're going to realize that you don't know. You're going to get through this stage where you think you have it all covered. You're going to have a tendency to use very complicated rhetoric, like semantics that are totally out there. You're going to find reasons to use very technical, complicated wording and verbiage. And that's good training. Obviously, you want to train your language, your communication skills. You want to be rhetorically sound, but you're going to confuse people with that. Blues are going to have a tendency to want to point out other people's mistakes, and in this, you can see blues are going to be great teachers, but difficult to manage. Again, all of this is going to have severe contradictions in it. That's what the problem with blues is. They become isolated by nature, and that's the difficulty that they have to work through, that they have to work over, and understanding, coming to know things. You need to understand that you can turn that around, because again, you're going to reach this stage once you get beyond that phase of I know everything and I'm so much smarter than everybody else. You're going to come to realize when you actually reach the boundary, when you hit the wall, that you don't know a fucking thing. You don't know anything. And if you can accept that and acknowledge I don't really know anything, then you can start to turn it around and you can actually decide to create. Because the bottom line filter of how you perceive reality is what you know. What is known to you beyond a shadow of a doubt is what is real. Now, remember that you're viewing this backwards. It's not what you know based on what the world is presenting and you understand it because you see it and you know it. It's what you know becomes real. Blues can turn that around, and this is how spot casting works. You have to really trust in your intuition. Don't let anybody ever convince you that your intuition is wrong or off. If it is, acknowledge it and move on. It can be from time to time. You might be paranoid or what have you, but trust your intuition and don't let... There are people out there, we're going to speak to this later. I don't want to mention it here because it's dangerous, but there are people out there who are going to be very good at tricking you into distrusting your own intuitions. And not only will that lead you astray and get you fucked over ultimately, but it's going to make you feel stupid, it's going to make you feel bad about yourself, it's going to make you distrust yourself in general for distrusting your own intuition. Don't make that mistake. Blues are going to have problems with money. They're not going to like money, essentially. I mean, everybody likes to have money, they like to spend money, they like to make money, but blues are going to have a problem with it because it's money and the very concept of I forgot the word. There's the word I lost. The very concept of money in and of itself, and damn it, it's gone. It's totally gone. The very concept of currency, fucking thank you. The very value behind currency itself is going to be something that pisses blues off. It's going to get on their fucking nerves. It gets on my nerves because it stands against their intellectual capacity. It's something that it implies that there's something more important than knowledge, than understanding. It implies that there's something that impedes wisdom and knowledge as being the ultimate goal, which knowledge and wisdom are not the same thing. Keep that in mind. Remember that. Knowledge is the understanding of a thing, the instruction for a thing, essentially. Wisdom is making it happen. Wisdom is practical use. There's a difference between training and practice. And blues need to breach that boundary, make it over that threshold into practicality, step out into the world, and present themselves. And the thing is that blues are going to be rare. We're not going to see a lot of blues. I think the reason for this is because blues can be so fucking very influential. Like, look at what I've done. There are blues out there, you can step up and you can make what I've done happen again and multiply that. Think if there were 10 of us doing the same thing as me for the initiative, how big it would be. Blues can be very influential. Blues can be very powerful. And look at like Tony Robbins, he's a blue. Look at what he's done. Look at what he can do. Imagine if he were working in line with us, if he knew that he was an outline. Like I said, I'm sure he knows about the initiative. I'm sure he knows he's an operative, but I'm saying if he were working with our crew, our faction of it, which eventually we'll get there. We'll get everybody working together, I promise. But we're going to start doing that this season. But, yeah, blues are going to have that habit of wanting to correct people's mistakes. That's going to piss people off. Blues are going to have that habit of isolating themselves. They're going to have that habit of, being egotistical in a sense. And also something that is going to happen to blues, an odd phenomenon, is that once they do reach the boundary and once they realize what's really happening and who and what they really are, they're going to run into a certain character. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to tell stories about this for the Approaching Nowhere course because this one seems really crazy. Like, there's a few stories about myself and my experiences I can't really tell yet because you guys won't understand it and you'll actually think that I'm crazy. So, I have to wait until I've got all the proper values in play for them. But you're going to run into a certain character in your life story, a recurring character that's going to be a very strange happenstance occurrence that you're going to want to know how to deal with appropriately, or you're going to miss very important factors of that encounter. So that's all the time I have right now for this, but it covers the notes I had for blues. Of course, there's more. Blues are going to be the most complicated of all of them, and the most difficult to deal with, essentially. But greens are going to have a knack for dealing with them. And there's certain reds, they're conflicting, reds and blues, but if they come together, like, obviously I was married to a red, and we still have the most wonderful relationship. There's a reason my sword is named after her, because she's my ultimate dance partner, and she is my closest friend, really, and the person I trust and love the most in the world. So, yeah, that's... Like I said, when we get into greens, we'll explain that greens and blues can have a very distinct relationship that's very productive, and so we need greens and blues to get together. Obviously, we need more blues in play. If you think you're a blue, if you have any of the things that I've explained here, if it makes sense to you, if you've experienced this, if you're in that phase of isolation, get the fuck out of it. Step up, get shit done. If you don't know how to, you need some direction, that's why I'm here. I'm the fucking director. Contact me. You too can be a director, and it's not that difficult. You just need the balls to fucking step up and do it. So, thank you all for watching. Keelah, siari, Taerve, siari, Namasté.